Okay, so am I forgetting someone else? It's just Lauren, right? No, she's not coming. They're traveling. They're not coming today. I guess they planned something because we were supposed to be done last week, but I got sick. What? Oh, Isabel. But she'll come in later, so I don't think I'm going to wait. We might get done a little early. I don't know. I'm sure we could talk about chance and free will and why good things happen to bad people for a long time, but maybe we'll get tired of talking about that. So some of you have seen these. I brought them for the junior high kids, but I thought I'd leave them out because how many of you have I brought these for? Have you seen these? Oh, awesome. You might have seen them at my house. Maybe you were looking at all my weird stuff, but okay, so here's the story of these. And so the people who are watching, I'm talking about these statues. I will maybe hold some of them up. My grandpa was in the military. And he was stationed for a while in Turkey. And then later he married an Italian lady whose family all still lived in Italy. So they would travel back and forth. So I don't know if it was when he was in the military or visiting Italian in-laws, don't know. But at some point, my grandpa was in Turkey, because he didn't speak Italian, so he just roamed around Europe while his wife was with her family. He was in Turkey, and apparently he went to an archaeological site in Turkey, and he traded a case of booze for these statues. We did not know about the existence of these statues until he was dead. And my mother was the executor of his will, his estate. So she's going through everything to get ready for an auction. And in a safe deposit box is this. So apparently he locked them away because he considered them to be valuable. My mom, they had pictures taken of them, and the guy who was arranging the auction had the pictures sent to Sotheby's, which is a well-known appraisal place. They will appraise things that might be of great value, usually upscale things, and they will return a statement of what they think this could go for at auction. Okay. So he did this, but my mother never saw the report. The auctioneer also proved to be a little nefarious in other ways. He kind of snatched things for himself. Because my grandpa, from all his trips to Italy, they had some pretty cool stuff. Anyway, so my mom, meantime, gave them to me because there's some sort of archaeological thing, and Mom thinks I will be interested, and I was. Then the auctioneer comes back to her later and says, "What happened to those statues? Would you like to sell them to me?" Apparently he knew something about the statues that he wasn't telling my mother. Time passes, and I do not know what these things are. I do not know how old they are. I do not even know where in Turkey they came from. Just Turkey. It's not very helpful. And I have sent pictures of them to various places and asked advice, and I just couldn't find anyone to help me. Finally, I found a place at the University of Pennsylvania again, that has an the Department for Archaeological Research in Turkey, something like that. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try these people. So I took pictures, all angles with rulers next to them and detail, and sent them. Can you tell me, what is this? What are these? And they weren't very precise, but they said, as well as we can tell, they are late Roman, early Byzantine, which would be exactly the time period we're talking about. So say roughly 500 AD. But what they are, I don't know. And so this thing, it's got, I'll pass them around. I don't mind if you hold them, but just don't drop it or throw it. That would be nice. It's got faces, but it seems like something, obviously, either it's a bowl that holds something or incense burner. It's occurred to me, incense burner. And then this is not like any of the others. It's obviously a different kind of stone. It's not very detailed. It's just etched in, the details. But these three go together, obviously. And this one's different than the others because it's got a headdress. These I don't think I'll pass around, but you can come down and look at them if you want to. It's got some sort of special headdress that the other ones don't have. The other ones just have hair. You know, so I always put this one in the middle when I put him out because he seems like the king. These are the little servants. I don't know. Which is, they're weird, and they've got these, and the back of this one is different too. It's all straight lines, and the others are swirly. But this one, look at this one. Look at its legs. Like, one leg is tucked behind the other. Why? But why the other two aren't? Do you see how there's a straight leg and then the other leg is sort of doing the thing? Like the little ballet thing? I don't know. Anyway, I have no idea what these things represent. But the intriguing thing to me is if they are roughly 500, this is after Christianity is the official imperial religion. And these are not Christian statues. These aren't saints. I don't know what these are, but I don't think they're any sort of representation of saints. This does not look like anything a Christian church would use with Zeus-looking faces on the side. I don't believe they're Christian. And I thought to bring them because it reminds me of this week's Art of the Week. This is an ivory plaque. And it was a set of 2 plaques, you know, one of these that you open, a diptych, from roughly 400 AD. And she is performing a pagan sacrifice. This is standard. She's got the incense, and they argue about which god it's to. They don't know. But the important thing is, by the time this was made, pagan sacrifices had been officially outlawed. So she's making a sacrifice, and somebody's making statues that are so not Christian in 400, 500, 600 AD. And it reminds us the world did not become Christian overnight. And the world did not become Christian just because Theodosius made it the official religion. It's going to take centuries for Christianity to work its way through society. And there's an undercurrent of pagan practice for all these years. So I don't know who made these, why. I hope that someday I will find out what they represent. I'm actually much more interested in that than I am I am interested in how old they are, but are they valuable or something like that? It doesn't do me any good if they're valuable. I don't want to sell them. You see what I mean? What I do want to know is, who is that? And what were they putting in this little dish? And why is that one little and a different stone? And does it go with the rest or not? I don't know. And unfortunately, for archaeology, when you don't know where something is from, that hinders you a lot. I mean, I know it's from Turkey. That doesn't help. Archaeologists want to know what site was it from. And not even that, what area of the site, what level was it found at. And without any sort of information, which my grandpa lacked, there were no papers with it, there was no documentation, and he's dead. And there's no one to ask. So maybe someday I will run into someone who can tell me. I felt like the Pennsylvania people were my final shot. I've contacted the Field Museum. Sometimes I've thought about contacting them again. I go to Chicago, not all the time, but my son lives there, you know, and I could set up an appointment and say, would somebody there talk to me about these? I also once did the online lottery to try to get tickets to Antiques Roadshow. If they would come into Des Moines once. My husband and I took a shot. We didn't get the tickets. I don't even know if anybody would travel with them that would know. But these people have access, you know, to a lot of information. Anyway, those are my statues. It's kind of a cool story. And it was kind of thrilling to think that they really are maybe 1,500 years old. But it still leaves me wondering so much what gods if gods, but I don't think people really just made stone figurines of, unless it's the king, you know. And maybe I'll live in it, but we can just wonder together. What? Well, I don't think, you know, for most, probably not, because for most of history, toys weren't really much of a thing. I mean, little rattles, little tiny toys, but these things are heavy. And I can't imagine, they seem to be some sort of stone, and I can't imagine a child playing with something like that not getting broken. If you live with young children at all, you know, if it's breakable, they will break it. That sounds mean, but you know, maybe accurate. So just one drop, and that would be, so it would be surprising. This definitely doesn't seem like a toy. And again, I just don't know. The faces on this dish don't seem anything like, it's got a beard, but these guys don't have beards. So I don't even know if they're all from the same time period. So could be, but I doubt it. All right. Those are, I guess, our art of the week and our statues of the week this week. Let's finish off the constellation of philosophy. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, I will try to send an email out to remind, but everybody has responded to me. Everybody in this room has either said, yes, I'm coming and I know when it is, or no, I'm not coming. This Friday is our movie. This Friday, 1:30 to 3:30, so your brother can be there, because Wednesday and Thursday are going to be combined, because there weren't, I think Thomas and William are the only two who could come from Wednesday. And then John is going to be gone. And it was going to be so small a group, you know, I thought I'd just put them together. So 1:30 to 3:30 on Friday. There will be food. But it's kind of late, I realize. So if you eat lunch, eat light, I suppose, so that you're wanting to eat something else. And the movie is an hour 40, something like that. And I'm giving us 2 hours. So that should be plenty of time for everybody to come and gather some food. Hey, Bella, come on in. We haven't really gotten started yet. If you want to look at these later, these are statues that came from Turkey, from an unknown location in Turkey by my grandfather, and maybe late Roman or early Byzantine. So maybe 500 AD, which is convenient because that is roughly the time that Boethius is in exile and awaiting execution for treason that he most likely did not have any part of. I was reading more about it. I didn't give you a very good rundown. It wasn't so much that he was involved in trying to kill the king, or that they thought he was. He was protecting the Senate. A large portion of the Senate was suspect, and Boethius was doing everything he could to protect the senators. And the king took this as protecting conspirators. And that's all Boethius. If he was guilty of anything, it was protecting people who may have been up to no good. But they were the Senate. Because they were the Senate. They were the Senate, and he didn't want the king turning on the Senate. It was the last stronghold of any sort of power that wasn't the king. And he felt like it was his job. It was like if somebody was coming after Congress, you know, and maybe a few members of Congress were up to no good, but they were coming after all of Congress. You'd say, no, you can't wipe out Congress just because a few people did something bad. And then if somebody turned on you and said, well, you're a dirty, rotten traitor yourself, aren't you, for protecting them? And therefore, he ended up in exile. Last week, we talked about the fact that he had forgotten. Philosophy said, you have forgotten who you are. You have forgotten where happiness is found. You started thinking it was in stuff. It was in power or glory, honor, riches. And you know what? That stuff cannot bestow happiness on you. So where does it come from? From the only one who actually has it all, God. And that's kind of where we left off. Books 4 and 5, Boethius is now, shall we say, cured by philosophy. He knows who he is now. He remembers that God is in charge and that he hasn't lost anything that really belonged to him. But he still has questions. He still has pesky questions. And at the beginning of book 4, this is the first question I asked you. What question is still disturbing him at the beginning of book 4? We're on page 101. Why does evil exist? Does this remind you of anyone? Augustine also was thinking about this very question, wasn't he? About 100 years or so before this book was written. What is evil? And if God is good, and if God is powerful, why in the world does he let it keep going on? He says this, the greatest cause of my sadness is really this, the fact that in spite of a good helmsman to guide the world, evil can still exist and even pass unpunished. And so philosophy has a very long answer. Philosophy doesn't have a quick answer. Which reminds me, there is no quick answer to this question. And I've mentioned this. If you haven't had this question asked you, you will someday. You know, if you're witnessing to someone, well, if God really exists, why are children starving in Africa or wherever? If God really is loving and powerful and he really exists, what about all those people that died in this earthquake or this, this tsunami, whatever? There's no fast answer. The first thing philosophy does is to try to show Boethius that evil is not as strong as the good. Remember Augustine had a problem, didn't he? What did he think about good and evil? Do you remember? What did he think about the respective powers of good and evil? Not as a Christian, but as he was coming. Do you remember what he thought about good and evil? Yeah. If good, the Manichees taught him that good and evil were equal forces. One isn't stronger than the other. They're in a battle to the death. It's like the end of some Avengers movie, where good battles evil. Except when you go to the Avengers movie, you're pretty sure the good's going to win. Right? Ultimately, even if, was it Thanos that kills half the world? Okay. Yeah. It's going to get undone somehow. Like we just have an expectation that eventually, as the story unfolds, Frodo and Sam are going to get to the mountain and they're going to destroy the ring somehow. And Sauron's going down. Voldemort is going to end up gone at the end. We have an expectation, partly because this is the story we live in as Christians, right? Good wins. We already know the end. We're still in the story, but we already know the end. But the pagan world didn't really have a good will win in the end sort of story they were living in, right? And that hung on, just like these people making these pagan statues and making pagan sacrifices still hangs on. How do we know that good will really win? Because when I look around, frankly, evil seems to be doing pretty good. It's kind of distressing. So the first thing she wants to show is that evil is actually weak. Now, I asked you a very general question. I'm just curious what you got out of it. How does she demonstrate that evil is weak?
That evil and good people all have the will for good, but they don't all have the strength for good. And so if you are good, that means that you are stronger.
Okay.
And so then you have the strength for good.
Okay. Do you want to add anything, Ruth? Do you want to tweak it a little bit? Or was that roughly where you're going? Which is a pretty good description of a pretty hard section, honestly. So she says, look, every activity depends on will and power, right? So if I want to drive home after this class, it means A, I have the will to do it, I want to do it, and two, I have the power to do it. I have a car, I know how to drive the car actually runs, but I have the power somehow. So she says, and maybe you debate this, I don't know, but she feels like she's proven this. Do you recall that happiness is the good? And since all men seek happiness, they all seek the good. Everybody wants to be happy. Just unfortunately, some of us have a misguided idea of where our happiness lies. But for us, it's the good. Maybe I think robbing the bank is my good. You know, it will give me happiness because I need cash. Robbing banks, that's the good. She says, so if everybody wants the good, good men do get what they're looking for. Yes. But if the wicked obtained what they want, that is goodness, they could not be wicked. If wicked people got good, they're not wicked anymore. Yeah, he agrees with this. So both groups want goodness, and one obtains it and the other doesn't. The good people get the good, the wicked people don't get the good. Surely there can be no doubt of the power of the good and the weakness of the bad. One of them, they both have the will to get the good. One of them apparently has the power and one of them doesn't. Does that sort of make sense to you? Does that argument make sense to you? Then she has a subsidiary argument. She says, suppose two people want to go for a walk, and one of them walks on his feet and one of them walks on his hands. Which one do you think will do a better job? Which will be a more powerful walker? Because unless you are a professional gymnast, maybe, and maybe even then, I'm assuming walking on your feet will work out better for you than walking on your hands. She says, well, the supreme good is the goal of good and bad men alike, but the good seek it in a natural way, by doing good things. That's like walking on your feet. It's the natural way of going for a walk. The bad strive to acquire the very same thing by means of their various desires, robbing the bank, whatever I think is my good. I'm looking for the good, but I'm looking for it in the wrong way, like I'm walking on my hands. If you ask what is the cause of the flight from virtue to vice, why do so many people want to do bad things then? If you say it is because they do not know what is good, I shall ask you what greater weakness is there than blindness of ignorance? This is her third way to show that it's weaker. First of all, the wicked don't get what they want, which is the good. Second of all, they're performing their activities in an unnatural way. Third, if they do the bad out of ignorance, ignorance is weakness too. Who wants to be ignorant? If you say they do it because it brings them pleasure, they are weak through lack of self-control because they cannot resist vice. And if you say they abandon goodness and turn to vice knowingly and willingly, this way they not only cease to be powerful, but they cease to be at all. So, according to philosophy, in this world, the wicked seem really strong. But they're not. I got to read part of her little poem. Actually, I'm going to read the whole little poem. It's a short little poem this time. High kings, you see, sit loftily on thrones, in purple bright, by sober arms enhedged, with savage threat in passion's breathless rage. That's what a king is like, right? I'm dressed up, I got my attendants, savage threats. Once strip from pride their robes of empty show, and see within the straightening fetters worn. If you stripped all the outward trappings off that king, he's really a prisoner. He's not free at all. Here lust o'erthrows the heart with poisonous greed. Here like a wave, wrath whips and bears off sense. Here captive sorrow sits, or hope torments. Here in one heart so many tyrants rule, the king's own will deposed, the enslaver slaved. That's what the king is like on the inside. He seems really powerful, this wicked king, breathing out savage threats. But he's not. Okay. So she still, do you notice she still hasn't really answered his question? Why does evil prosper if God's in control of the world? Her first step was, okay, first of all, I need to show you evil isn't as strong as you think. Next section. What is the true reward of the good? What do the good get? True happiness, true good. So if I think robbing the bank is my good, I do get the money, but didn't she already show us that money isn't happiness by itself? And also, what else do I get if I rob the bank? What is my situation if I rob the bank? Yeah, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life for the police. And or I will be in prison. One or the other. This doesn't sound good to me. The good get the actual good. They get what they're looking for. She says, goodness never fails to receive its appropriate reward. Since the glory is conferred on each one by his own goodness, he will only lose his reward when he stops being good. And then she says, goodness is happiness. The reward of the good, then, a reward that can never be decreased, and no one's power can diminish, and no one's wickedness darken, is to become God's. Now, sometimes, for some people, this feels like a shocking thing to say, but I really think he means nothing different than the church fathers said. Jesus became a man so that men could become gods. He said, I have called you gods. He said, I called you brothers. We just don't get to be God by nature. We will never be all-powerful, omniscient. But we partake of the nature of God through Jesus. That's what he came here to do for us. To bestow his divine nature on us. This is what he's saying. That's what the good get. The divine nature. The bad get, I don't know, prison. Or looking over your shoulder. Or disappointment. That might be even worse. Man, I thought after I robbed that bank and I had all that money, I'd be perfectly happy. So disappointed I'm not perfectly happy. The good don't get that. She says, evil is not so much an infliction, something someone does to you, as a deep-set infection. Let's see if I want to read this. There's another section. The result is that you cannot think of anyone as human whom you see transformed by wickedness. You could say that someone who robs with violence and burns with greed is like a wolf. A wild and restless man who is forever exercising his tongue in lawsuits could be compared to a dog yapping. We all know it. Maybe we've had the dog or we've lived next door to the dog that just won't shut up. A dog yapping. A man whose habit is to lie hidden in an ambush and steal by trapping people would be likened to a fox. A man of quick temper has only to roar to gain the reputation of a lion heart. The man who is lazy, dull, and stupid lives an ass's life. a man of whimsy and fickleness who is forever changing his interests. It's just like a bird. They've lost part of what makes them human. And then this is the paragraph before, but I'm going to read it second because it's kind of shocking. That they used to be human is shown by the human appearance of their body, which still remains. So it was by falling into wickedness that they lost their human nature. This is all of us to some extent. And I wrote a note to myself in the margin. So none of you have read this with me yet. Next year we're going to read the Divine Comedy, probably the best known, the masterpiece of the Middle Ages. And in this poem, a man, who's the author, Dante, takes a trip through hell, purgatory, and paradise. And when he goes through hell, he sees the souls of people, and I'm sorry, I can't remember which particular sin they're guilty of. But Dante expresses surprise, like, oh, I didn't know he was dead already. And his guide said, yeah, technically he's not. His body is still up there. But when he started pursuing evil, it's like he lost his soul. He was already gone. He's already here. It's just a shell operating up there. And I feel like Boethius is saying something. It's really ugly and shocking. The fact that by my choices, I lose my human nature. I lose what makes me human. And of course, Boethius and Dante aren't trying to write science books. Do you know what I mean? Or it's literature, it's poetry. They don't mean it literally. They don't literally mean that people's souls are just disappearing into hell and their bodies are just walking around empty. It's a metaphor. But the idea that they've lost something, I feel like they're saying the same thing. And philosophy says, look, Boethius, you're looking at all the wicked people that are doing well, and you're sitting here in exile and waiting for execution, and you tried to do everything right. You tried to do the right thing, Boethius, and it doesn't seem fair. But you've got to look at it from a bigger perspective. All those wicked people, they're barely even human anymore. Would you really want to be like that, Boethius? Would you trade with them? When you put it that way, I don't know if it makes it easier to be in exile and await execution, because I've never done that. But it reminds me of the verse in Scripture where we told, in the Psalm where he says, I looked at the wicked and how they're prospering, and I was angry, and then I went into the temple of the Lord and I considered their end. How does the story end? Not well, unless they repent. Okay, so the good get the good, the wicked don't. And since the good brings you happiness, the wicked can never be happy. They're less powerful, they can never be happy. That's where we are in the argument. Okay. What is good about bad people getting punished? How is that helpful to them? This is the next question I asked you.
It stops them from being able to fulfill their wickedness.
Okay. And why should we want to stop them from fulfilling their wickedness?
Because it brings further depravity.
Because it just makes them worse. If you're already turning into non-human and becoming what? A fox or a wolf or a lion or a bird or a yapping dog, I'm doing you a favor to pull you back from that. Does it feel like a favor to the wicked person when they get punished? No. Does it ever feel like a favor when your parents punish you? Let's just get real. And I know I'm the mom, but I was the kid once. I've been punished plenty. I've been there. Not fun at all. Am I thankful now that I was kept from doing certain things? Yeah, I really am. And maybe you're old enough that you are too. Maybe you're getting to the point where you can appreciate, I'm so glad my parents never let me get away with that, and straighten that out. It's not fun, but it's helpful. So here's what she says. It may seem incredible to some, but it must be the case that the wicked are less happy if they achieve their desires than if they are unable to do what they want. For if desiring something wicked brings misery, greater misery is brought by having had the power to do it, without which the unhappy desire would go unfulfilled. He says, this is kind of hard to admit. Wicked, that anybody is better off when they're punished. But he says, she says to him, if someone thinks this conclusion is hard to accept, he ought to show either that some false assumption has preceded it, or that the way the arguments have been marshaled does not necessarily produce the conclusion. Otherwise, provided he agrees to what preceded, there is absolutely no ground for arguing about the conclusion. If someone has an argument and their premises are valid and they've argued logically, you have to accept the conclusion, whether you like it or not. Do we always do that? Or can you think of an example when we know an argument to be completely true and valid, but we just say, but I don't like that conclusion?
There's times when people can misrepresent an argument. There was one that I read about, I forgot who it was, but he said basically like, you can have a bad argument with your elephant and you can deliver the words, and you can still be wrong, but if you're arguing with someone that is right, you can still lose, or win the argument but still be wrong. You know, or like someone can still lose an argument even if they're right if they don't know how to.
This is true, but for philosophy's purposes, I mean, I agree completely, and it's a really important point too, because it means we have to learn to be skillful with words. If we have the truth and we have the right, we need to be able to communicate it, or we will lose to the other side if our ability to express ourselves is lacking. But for philosophy's purposes, we're going to assume that it's expressed well. You have an argument, and your premises, yes, I agree, but I don't like your conclusion. I have a couple in my mind, but I just wanted to see if you had ever a time in your life when somebody made an argument, and like, yes, I agree with your argument. However, I'm going to turn around and do the other thing anyway, just because I want to. I mean, I think we do. It might be hard to think of it. So I went to Classical Conversations yesterday, and I was one of the judges for the senior thesis defense. So they write a senior thesis, and then 3 girls had to get up and give an abstract, and then a panel of judges asked them questions about their research, and I did it. And one girl, it was about unethical food practices, and this was specifically marketing trash, processed foods, producing foods that are bad for your health, marketing them in kind of devious ways. And if that's ethical or not for companies to do this, okay? So this is in my mind a lot because I just read her like 20-page paper on stats on unhealthy food marketing. And I like my share of unhealthy food. Who doesn't, you know? And so this is an area, I mean, I've been very forthright with you guys. I've once started with, I really like to eat. I like good food. I like sweets. Really like sweets. It's very bad for me. Very bad. And so there are premises that I accept that sugar and wheat are bad for me. They make me fat, and they make my cholesterol go up, and they make my blood sugars go up. I accept this completely, you know. But I still eat it. You see, there's a completely logical argument made for the fact that you really shouldn't be putting that in your body. Yeah, but I want to. We don't always follow the logic. For example, maybe this might be closer to home for you guys. Too much screen time. There's no scientific doubt about the fact that it has a negative impact on your brain. Nobody's debating this anymore. It does. It will make you less intelligent. It will lower your attention span. But people keep doing it. I turn on the TV and I watch the whatever and I get on YouTube and we all know you don't ever watch one cute cat YouTube video, do you? You know, they keep coming. They keep coming. It's not good. And I completely accept all the premises that show me this is true, but then I do it anyway. This seems like, this is kind of a tangent, this is kind of an aside, but this is exactly what philosophy is saying. If you think a particular conclusion is hard to accept, you have to show that some false assumption has been made. And if you can't show that, there is no ground for arguing about the conclusion. And you know what? I want to isn't really an argument, but I want to. I'm not here to guilt any of you. I mean, I'm guilting myself a little bit. I'm not here to guilt you about your eating or viewing habits. I'm just saying when something has been proven to us, we should accept the conclusion, but we don't always. We don't always. Boethius is having a hard time accepting the argument that the wicked are better off when we punish them, that anyone could be better off when they're punished. But philosophy is, but I just took you through the argument. You agree with every step of the argument. You have to agree to the conclusion. And this is the conclusion. The wicked are happier if they suffer punishment than if they are unrestrained by any just retribution. And I do not have in mind what you think, namely that wickedness is corrected by punishment and returned to the right path by the fear of punishment, and is also an example to others to avoid punishable actions. Because there's two ways we could take that here. Okay, the wicked are better off when they're punished because it will deter them from further wickedness. Their fear punishment, right? Or it's an example to others. I'm going to make an example of you. Sometimes we talk about putting people in prison as being for rehabilitation. We're going to make you a better person. And she says, that's not the thing to do at all. That's not the most important thing. Or that people will fear, I won't rob the bank because I'm afraid of prison. She says the real way they are happier is when the wicked receive punishment, they receive something good. The punishment itself, which is good because of justice. But when they go unpunished, they acquire some extra evil in actually going scot-free, which you have agreed is bad because of its injustice. And there is something else equally well-founded on a firm base of argument, which they will not agree with, namely, those who commit injustice are more unhappy than those who suffer it. Okay, picture two people. One of them just slugs the other one right in the face, just punches him right in the nose. Philosophy just said, the guy who did the punching is worse off than the guy who just got punched. This is not my first reaction. I feel really bad for the guy who got punched. He says, I'd like to hear this argument. Can you explain to me how the guy who got punched in the face is better off than the guy who just punched him? She says, suppose then you were sitting in judgment in the law courts. On whom would you decide to pass sentence? The man who committed the wrong or the man who had suffered it? Who are you going to punish? The guy who did the punching or the guy who got punched? The question is obvious. Who gets punished? The guy who did the punching. So you would think that the perpetrator of an injury is more wretched, I think she means a worse person, than the victim. Yes. It is clear then, when someone is done an injury, the misery belongs not to the victim, but to the perpetrator. But the court orators of today take the opposite course. They try to excite sympathy of the court for those who have suffered some grievous or painful injury. although a juster sympathy is more due to those who are guilty. Have you ever thought we ought to feel more sorry for the person who did the punching? Because seriously, that's how low you have sunk? That's the kind of person you are? I feel so sorry for you. They ought to be brought to justice, the people who do the punching, as it were, not by a prosecution counsel with an air of outrage. How dare he do something like that? But by prosecution kind and sympathetic, like sick men being brought to a doctor. Oh, you poor thing, you've really sunk low. We're going to do something about that for you. We're going to restrain you now from doing any more of that sort of thing again. That is why among wise men, there is no place at all left for hatred. For no one except the greatest of fools would hate good men, and there is no reason at all for hating the bad. All right, I got to tell you, that makes me stop. There's no reason for hating the bad. I do it all the time, though. It makes me so angry when people do wicked things. It makes me so angry. And philosophy says there is no place for hating those people. There's no place for hating Hitler. This is, Hitler's my go-to wicked guy, right? I always bring him in. And Nero would work too. Caligula. But Hitler's convenient. She's saying there's no place for hating Hitler. You should feel sorry for him. Dude, you're barely even human anymore. That is pathetically sad. Just leave you with that. Think about that. Next time somebody does something really horrible and you just want to rage at them, I challenge you to stop and say, from God's perspective, from philosophy's perspective, that person is poor and wretched. That they would even want to do something like that. They are already so far gone. I hope someone restrains them, not as an example, or not even necessarily to rehabilitate them, just to stop you from falling more into the pit of being non-human, metaphorically. So, Boethius accepts all of this, but he feels like, and perhaps you too feel like, you haven't really answered my question, philosophy. Yes, I understand evil is less powerful, and I understand that people are better off when they're restrained from the evil. I understand that the good get what they truly are looking for, and the wicked don't. But yet, I'm still seeing the wicked prospering. Why this is all turned upside down, and why good men are oppressed by punishments reserved for crime. Boethius could say, like me, I'm being punished. I didn't do anything wrong. And bad men can snatch the rewards that belong to virtue. Surprises me very much. I would be less surprised if I could believe that the confusion of things is due to the fortuitous operations of chance. But my wonder is only increased by the knowledge that the ruling power of the universe is God. Do you follow his problem? He's saying, you're telling me that God rules everything, but yet the wicked still prosper. They're not getting their end right away. They're not being restrained right away. And the good get the shaft. And if it were just luck, fortune's wheel, like, okay, I'd be okay with that. Things just happen. But you told me that God rules everything. Why does he rule it like this? So the last question I asked you in book 4, what is the difference between chance or luck or fortune, whatever you want to call it, and providence. How are they different?
Providence is like set up in a way that God planned it.
Okay,
Chance is just like coincidence.
okay. Are they two separate things? Because it sounds a little like two separate things, doesn't it? Does anybody have an answer? Whether or not providence and chance are two separate things? Or, I was going to be clever and use a visual aid, but I don't need to. Stupid. Think of a coin. Yeah, I don't need to get out a coin for you to see it. Heads, tails. Are they separate from each other? Is it one coin? It's one coin. If I look on one side, it's heads. If I look on the other side, it's tails. Same coin. We're both looking at different pictures. You know, I'm holding the coin now between us. Same coin we're looking at. Let me read how Boethius says it. When this plan, the grand plan of the universe, is thought of as in the purity of God's understanding, it is called providence. And when it is thought of with reference to all things, whose motion and order it controls, it is called by the name the ancients gave it, fate. Providence is the divine reason. Fate, on the other hand, is the planned order inherent in things, subject to change through the medium of which providence binds everything in its own allotted place. This unfolding of the plan in time, which brought together as a unified whole in the foresight of God's mind, is called providence. The same unified whole, when dissolved and unfolded, is called fate. She's saying chance and providence aren't two separate things. They're the same thing. It's just that one of them exists in the mind of God and one of them we see unrolling in history. It's all already existing in the mind of God, she says. But we don't see the whole thing. It's like, you're reading a book. This isn't a very good choice, but it's a novel, okay, some piece of fiction. And you're following the plot. It's already here. But is it already here to you when you're on page 100? You only unfolded so much. It's like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen to these characters. Oh, I didn't see that coming. And if you get into the book enough, you forget that you're holding the whole thing. You're entered into the story now. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully you've all had a book, at least one that did that to you. Like, I'm so into this book, I'm just not even paying attention that it's a book anymore. I want to see what's going to happen. It's already been written. But you don't know yet because it's unfolding in time. She says, we see it unfolding in time, and we call it chance or fate. The relationship between the ever-changing course of fate and the stable simplicity of providence is like that between reasoning and understanding. I want to stop because these are just big words that we just kind of gloss over. It sounds intelligent, you know. What is reasoning? What am I doing when I'm reasoning? Okay, you're doing your math. What's the reasoning part? You're doing a math problem. Trying to find a solution. I'm working it out. I'm solving for X. I'm doing this geometric proof, whatever. I'm reasoning it. So then what's understanding? Knowing why you're doing it, and also, if I understand the whole proof, I'm going with geometry now, or the whole equation, what point have I got to in the reasoning? I now understand the whole thing. Where am I in the process? I'm at the end. The whole proof is in front of me, or the solved equation and all the steps. Do you see? Reasoning and understanding. Fate is working through, and then providence. It's the whole. Do you see? Do you see the parallel? I hope. Here, she gives another one too. That between that which is coming into being and that which is between time and eternity, or the difference between a moving circle and the still point in the middle. They're part of the same circle. It is because you men are in no position to contemplate this order that everything seems confused and upset. No doubt your objection will be that it is impossible for there to be a more unjust confusion than when the fortunes of good men and bad alike continually vary between adversity and prosperity. Right? Philosophy just said, well, your problem is you don't see with God's perspective. I know that it seems to you just totally unfair that good men go down and bad men go up on the wheel. But listen to this might be one of the most spectacular lines in the book. And I shall ask you if men have such soundness of mind as to be infallible in their judgment of who is good and who is bad. Terrible things happen to this good person. Wonderful things happen to this bad person. Oh, excuse me, are you God? Are you the judge of who is good and bad in the world? Do you read men's hearts? I don't think you do. You don't know. God looks out from the watchtower of providence, sees what suits each person, and applies to him whatever he knows is suitable. This, then, is the outstanding wonder of the order of fate. A knowing God acts, and ignorant men look on with wonder at his actions. Now, if I stopped there, you might say, wait a minute, Mrs. Ferguson and Boethius, are you saying then that every time I see something bad happen to a good person, it means they were secretly bad and they're getting punished? Or every time a seemingly bad person prospers, they were really secretly good? No, we know that's not true. Look at Job. The story of Job blows that out of the water. And the blind man that the disciples asked Jesus, well, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? Nobody. You got it all wrong, says Jesus. You don't get what's going on here at all. This is not a punishment for something. She didn't say they get their punishment or their reward. She said God gives whatever is suitable. Whenever, therefore, you see something happen here different from your expectation, due order is preserved in the events, but there is confusion and error in your thinking. Let us suppose that there was someone of such moral goodness that in his case the judgment of man and God coincided. This man is perfectly good. All the people know he's good. God knows he's good. He's Job. He will still be weak in strength of mind. Should adversity befall him, he will perhaps give up practicing the innocence which could not ensure his good fortune. And so a wise direction spares the man whom adversity might affect for the worse. This man in this case is not Job. He is Job-like in his goodness. But God knows if I bring him down into misfortune, he will not be able to cut it. He's not strong enough. I can't let that happen to him. He's going to need to be spared because his spirit isn't strong enough to handle it yet. To avoid distressing someone who is not fit for it. Another man may be perfect in every virtue, holy and very close to God. Providence judges that it would be outrageous for him to meet with any adversity, to such an extent that he is not even allowed to be upset by bodily illness. Often it happens that supreme power is given to good men so that the exuberance of wickedness may be checked. Maybe this good man got power, not because he's a good man, but because God's using him to check the wicked. Others receive a mixture of good and bad fortune according to their quality of mind. Providence stings some people to avoid giving them happiness for too long. And others she allows to be vexed by hard fortune to strengthen their virtues of mind, by the use and exercise of patience. Some people are excessively afraid of suffering, for which they actually have an endurance. Others are full of scorn for suffering that they cannot in fact bear. Both kinds she brings to self-discovery through hardship. It is only the power of God to which evils may also be good, when by their proper use he elicits some good result. Why do bad things happen to good people? The short answer is we don't know. Only God knows. But he gives to each person what that person needs to become more like him. Some people sail through life, and God only knows why. Maybe they don't have the endurance level to handle the pain. This is a very unhelpful thing to say to anyone who's experiencing adversity, but I've heard it said, oh, God must think you are very strong in your faith and you're a strong person to give you this. And don't ever say that to someone who's suffering something terrible. It's zero help at all. They mean well when they say it, but they're probably actually saying something approaching accurate. You know, if I'm off on a path and the only thing that can wake me up from my path is adversity, God should send it. And that would be loving of him, wouldn't it? If I can't endure it and he spares me of it, that's loving. If he puts a wicked person in charge of a kingdom, but he uses that wicked person to check other people's wickedness, he's using that person for good, even though the person doesn't even know he's being used. This reminds me of Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh in Egypt. He's being used by God. He doesn't even know it. This is her difficult, not easy to swallow answer. When we see things happening in the world, it seems very much like chance. Somebody won the lottery. Somebody's house burned down. Somebody gets elected to public office and they bought their way in. Someone else is a good sort and they campaigned and worked hard and nobody votes for them. You know, just chance. You know, this one had money and that one had the right friends and this one didn't. It seems like chance. But the idea that, no, Providence is working everything out and giving to each person exactly what they need. And if it's something not pleasant at the time, God is there with you in it. It's not the pretty answer. You know what I mean? We just want to hear that everything's just going to be rosy and happy. But Boethius isn't going to listen to that, is he? He knows everything's not going to be rosy and happy. He's going to be executed. He knows it. And he's in exile with his family. Do you now see, she says, what is the consequence of all we have said? All fortune is good. All fortune, whether pleasant or adverse, is meant either to reward or discipline the good, or to punish or correct the bad. We agree, therefore, on the justice or usefulness of fortune, and so all fortune is good. For you who are set on the path of increasing virtue have not come so far only to abandon yourself to delights or languish in pleasure. You are engaged in a bitter but spirited struggle against fortune of every kind, to avoid falling victim to her when she is adverse, or being corrupted by her when she is favorable. Hold to the middle way with unshakable strength. It is in your own hands what fortune you wish to shape for yourself. Something happens to you, it's all in how you accept it. Whether it's good fortune or bad fortune. But it's all in God's hands. Okay, that's book 4. Maybe not a neat answer to why do bad things happen to good people, but maybe an answer that we can rest in. God is in charge. And you know, this is the problem with Job, isn't it? Remember his friends came and said, you know, Job, you must have done something terrible because God only lets things like this happen to wicked people. It's like, yeah, no, I didn't. He didn't claim to be sinless. He said, I haven't done something horrible. I've done all the good that I know to do. There's something else going on here. And Job was upset. And Job asked God why. God never informs him why. But Job is the only one. God comes and finally speaks his bit at the end of the book of Job and says, Job, my servant, is the only one who hasn't spoken wrongly of me. All you friends, you don't know what's going on here. You talk like you do, but you don't know. At least Job just admits, I don't know why this is happening. But the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's his attitude. Okay. The other thorny question then, people ask this too. So, chance is really providence. Providence is just the Latin word pro, before, and video, to see. Providence is God seeing beforehand. If God already knows what I'm going to have for lunch, don't I have to eat that? And if I have to eat it because God already knows, don't I not have any free will? I have to do what God has already seen happen. What's the problem with if I decide, let me put it this way, if I decide to give money to charity, God already saw that I would do that. So it was kind of set. If I decide to go rob a bank, God already saw that I would do that. It was pretty much set. So what is the problem then with me getting rewarded for giving to a charity and punished for robbing the bank?
Their arguments, he says that we have the free will to do something, but God would not be omnipotent and omniscient if he didn't see it before. So he had to see it before because he's God, but that doesn't mean that he makes us do that.
Okay. So yes, that's half of it. But the seeing before part, this is a little bit misleading, perhaps. Does anybody want to add to, I do agree, but I want to take it further than that. Does anyone want to add to what Addison said? So just building up to the argument, and Boethius tells philosophy, if God imposes order upon all events, there's no opportunity for random events. Whenever something is done for some purpose, and for certain reasons something other than what is intended to happen, we call it chance. But is there any room in this chain of close-knit causes for free will? All right, let me read this. This is my favorite thing. I love thinking about this for reasons I will tell you in a minute. If a man is sitting, it is necessary that the opinion which concludes that he is sitting is true. Addison is sitting. Therefore, when I say, I am of the opinion that Addison is sitting, that is true. On the other hand, if the opinion about Addison is true, I'm just going to throw you in here, that she is sitting, it is necessary that she is sitting. If she's sitting, my opinion that she's sitting is true. If my opinion that she is sitting is true, then she is sitting. Are we good? There's necessity in both statements. In the one that the man is sitting, or Addison in this case, and the other that the opinion is true. But it is not because the opinion is true that Addison is sitting. Rather, the opinion is true because it is preceded by the man's act of sitting. So although the cause of truth proceeds from the one side, there is nevertheless a common necessity in either side. Clearly, the same reason applies to providence and future events. For even if it is the case that they are foreseen because they are going to happen, and not that they happen because they are foreseen, it is nonetheless necessary that either future events be foreseen by God, or that the things foreseen happen as foreseen. Great. But problem, it still takes away free will. If my opinion is true, therefore Addison is sitting. If Addison is sitting, therefore my opinion is true. But in both cases, it is necessary that Addison be sitting, and she doesn't have any other choice in the matter. If my opinion is true, she has to be sitting. If she's sitting, she has to sit in order that my opinion be true. He's saying this is the same if God saw that Addison was going to be sitting there, and he did see. I don't know if, but you know what I mean. That because God saw that Addison would sit in that chair, she had no choice but to sit in that chair. And because Addison sat in that chair, she had to sit in that chair because God is always true. And if that was part of providence, you had to sit in that chair to make his opinion true, that you would sit in that chair. It sounds like you had no choice. God saw you would sit in that chair, and therefore you have to sit in that chair. It's still a problem. The question, therefore, is how can God foreknow these things will happen if they are uncertain? What if Addison came in and she decided to sit on the floor? Just on a whim. Then God foresaw that she would sit on the floor. Well, did she have a choice? Did she have a choice? But if God knew which one she was going to do, how did she have a choice?
His knowledge doesn't mean that he makes us or doesn't affect our choice.
So God, from time past all eternity, knew you were going to sit in that chair today. And you came in here. What if you decided to sit on the floor?
Well, he knows I'm going to decide to sit on the chair.
But that sounds to me like you had to sit in the chair, one way or the other. Like we're just kind of dancing around it, but one way or the other, Addison, you're sitting in that chair.
Because I chose to, because he did that. Why would my choice change?
But could it have changed?
No, because I have no reason for it to change. If I decided to,
If.
he knew.
But still lurking under there is but I can't make a different decision. God knew I wouldn't, but in this moment I can't because God saw it. I mean, I agree with you, Addison. I'm throwing you under the bus. But you see, it's still sort of a dilemma. That God knows what I'm going to do today. And so if I suddenly decide to have a different lunch or take a different way home, it seems like I can't.
But what is different? There is no different because there's no set path. It's me choosing. So my choice becomes a set path and he knows.
Yes, but set path sounds a lot like not free will. You're saying free will, but you're saying set path.
I'm choosing that and he just knows what I'm going to do.
See, I think we intuitively know this is true, what Addison is saying, and I'm bullying you because I can. But it seems, let me read this, but we'll hold that because I've got the way Boethius fleshes it out, which I love. If it were true that Addison had no choice but to sit in that chair because God foreknew that she would sit in that chair, do you see how it would take away all hope and prayer? Everything is set. So we have this spectrum. Can you see, like it's a timeline, a line, a spectrum. And on one end we have everything is set and we have no choice. The modern world, determinism, okay? They just changed the name, but there's modern scientists. You know, all the atoms swirl around in the air in a certain way, and this configuration, that, and everything is determined. There are people who believe this. That I'm going to have a certain lunch not because God has foreseen it, but because the certain atoms that are swirling around are going to cause, you know, a certain effect. Every effect has a cause, right? And that had a cause, and that had a cause, and that had a cause, and you go back to, I don't know, the Big Bang or something like this. You know, and this would be the argument. That's one end. Everything is random. Everything is totally random. There's no control over anything. It's just kind of floating around. Have you guys ever seen the movie Forrest Gump? Okay. I believe, okay, very entertaining movie, but I believe it's sort of a Wicked Message movie, I believe that feather that floats around, I believe everything is chance. He just randomly runs into all these historical personages, and his life is just sort of a random chance. So these are the two, okay. And if everything is set, there's no point in praying for anything or hoping for anything because it's set. If everything is random, God's not going to step in to do anything about it. Both of these take away all relationship we can have with God. Because I'm praying for somebody to get well. I'm praying for a sick person to get well, but God already knows. And not God already knows, God has already determined. This is how I need to start saying it to you. God has already determined. This is the path of history because he's in charge. He's working everything for the good. All right? So we say providence, and you're taking that literally. He saw it beforehand. But I think philosophy is taking it, he's turning the wheel. Everything is set in motion. Everything has to happen for a reason. He's already decided what it's going to be. Do you see? That's a little different way to put it, isn't it? But your interpretation is closer to what philosophy actually comes out on. And she has a rather complicated argument. I think it's kind of a cool argument. She says, the cause of this mistake, do I have any choice? Does God just work the wheel, and I'm on the wheel. I'll be where God puts me. I don't have any choice about it. The cause of this mistake is that people think that the totality of their knowledge depends on the nature and capacity to be known of the objects of knowledge. This is all wrong. Everything that is known is comprehended not according to its own nature, but according to the ability to know of those who do the knowing. Okay, she uses a long, complicated argument. I'm going to put it in easier terms because I think this will be closer to home. You have an infant, you have a 5-year-old, you have a 10-year-old, you have an adult. You picture it? And there is an apple. I'm making this up on the fly, so I hope this works out. How does the infant perceive or understand or know the apple? Not much. As food? No. This looks like nothing the infant wants to eat or has the capacity to eat. Probably doesn't understand it's got a different color inside. It's an object of a certain color and a certain shape. Might as well be a ball. It has no other meaning. Okay, does that make sense? The 5-year-old knows about fruit, knows this can be snacked on, right? This can be eaten, knows what it looks like inside, probably knows where it comes from, right? Grows on trees, maybe went to the orchard and picked them. This is the understanding. The 10-year-old has probably talked about some sort of nutrition, right? So knows the apple in every way that the infant and the 5-year-old know it. It's a round, shiny object. It's of a certain color, and it's good for food, but also might know it is a fruit. Fruit means that it bears the seeds of the plant. It comes from the flower. It's the fully developed. It has a scientific knowledge of the apple, right? Maybe at 10, 12 years old. The adult probably knows the different kinds of apples that are good for baking. Like I'm going to use the Granny Smith for the pie. This is my favorite sort of apple. Probably knows the various prices per pound of the apples currently at the grocery store. It's the same apple. The only thing different is the capacity of the knower of the apple. Does that make sense to you guys? I like that better. I'll get to use this all week. It worked. I made it up and it worked. God has a way of knowing that we don't. And it is this: God knows, well, okay, let's start with us. We know things as they travel in time. And we only know them when we travel through time. So listen to everything we said, and all of us did it. God saw beforehand what you were going to do. That's how we think of it, right? God saw long ago that I was going to do something today, and therefore he, it seems like I have to do it. And yes, Addison.
But it's also outside time and space.
That's it. God perceives things in a way that we can't even imagine. This is this is philosophy's answer. All time is right now. So if I see a bird flying in the trees out there, I didn't see beforehand that the bird was going to fly through the trees. It's happening right now. Am I making the bird fly through the trees? No. Every time is like that to God. He didn't make Addison sit in the chair. He didn't even foresee that Addison was going to sit in the chair. He just sees it all happen all the time right now. There was a girl, I've told some of you this story. I was once a youth group leader at a church I went to, and there was a girl, and they do prayer requests, and one girl was mentally handicapped. And so she would ask for some odd things sometimes. And once she asked to pray for the people on the Titanic. She did not mean, I don't think, the souls of the people on the Titanic. She meant pray for people on the Titanic. And unfortunately, one of the leaders that was there didn't say, well, we can't do that. They kind of dismissed that. Well, that's not, that's over. But I've just, for some reason, I've been thinking about this. This happened like 12 or 15 years ago. It hasn't already happened and done with God. It's happening right now. So then later, I ran across this novel. It's very weird. A guy named Charles Williams, who was buddies with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all the rest of them. But he wrote, they called him the brainiac of the bunch. I mean, the guy that C.S. Lewis and Tolkien hung out with, I was like, yeah, he's the super smart one. What? He wrote a book where times were crossing, where people were praying for other people in other times. I'm not saying go back and start praying for World War II, and that would be overwhelming to pray for every time in history. But I'm saying it's present right now for God. This is the thing we forget when we talk about providence. He saw beforehand. He's watching me do it right now. I'm totally free to do it. He's watching me do it. He's been watching me do it since time began. Because all times are right there. I love this. Do you see what I mean? And it's because he has the ability. I don't even know what that would be like. I can't even fathom what you see everything happening all the time. Because I'm like the infant looking at the apple, and he's the adult looking at the apple. Like, I see every level of the apple. I see it in every way that it can be known. I see nothing. It's just one moment passing after the next. And that's my experience of existence. Anyway, that's Boethius and philosophy's answer to, if God knows everything that's going to happen, am I free to make any decision I wish? Their answer is yes, because here's the description. It's not the foreknowledge of the future so much as the knowledge of a never-ending present. And frankly, I have no idea what that, I know what it means roughly, ever so roughly. Now, that ends book 5, but I want to mention a couple of cool things that Boethius does at the end of his book. First of all, in book 1, way back at the beginning, It's in section 2. It's very, very much at the beginning. In the little poem that ends book 2, it says, "Now see that mind that searched and made all nature's hidden secrets clear, lie prostrate prisoner of night." This was Boethius. You used to search all the mysteries with me, Boethius. And now you lie prostrate prisoner of night. His neck bends low, in shackles thrust, and he is forced beneath the weight to contemplate the lowly dust. Oh, poor Boethius, you don't even recognize me anymore. All you can do is stare at the dust. Then, towards the end of book 5, "Alone the race of men can lift its head on high, can stand with body upright and disdain the ground. This picture warns, except to witless earthbound men, you who raise your eyes to heaven with thrusting face, raise up as well your thoughts, lest weighted down to earth your mind sink lower as your body rises high." This is Boethius at the beginning of the book. His face is buried in the ground. And the book ends with, "Look up." There is more going on here than you realize and understand. And God has it all in control. It's not just fate. It's not just luck. He's got it all worked out. But he's not forcing you to do anything. You're totally free to make your choices. So he ends with this. There are 2 kinds of necessity. One simple, as for example, the fact that it is necessary that all men are mortal, they all die. The other conditional, as for example, if you know someone is walking, it is necessary that he is walking. For that which a man knows cannot be other than as it is known. But this conditional necessity does not imply simple necessity. Just because I see a man walking, it is necessary that I know that he walks, but I didn't make him go for a walk, you know. So she says, there might be one kind of necessity, but not the other. But the will is free from all necessity. Now listen to the very last sentence of the book. "A great necessity is laid upon you, if you will be honest with yourself. A great necessity to be good, since you live in the sight of a judge who sees all things." She just went to great pains to say there is no necessity. There is no necessity for everything you do, Boethius. But guess what, Boethius? There's a great necessity. You are under a necessity. It's the necessity to be good, to follow God's will. Because it's happiness, and it's joy, and he's the one who holds all the good. You may not be under necessity to sit in that chair or eat a certain lunch, but you're under a necessity of a sort to be good, because it's what you were made for. It's what humanity was made for. And that's the consolation of philosophy. How she comes to Boethius and says, "Boethius, you're going to be executed. And that's tough. But let me hold your hand and walk you through it. Because you gotta know who's in charge here. And you got to know where the true good lies and where your happiness really lies." I told you guys that this and The City of God by Augustine, the most important books of the Middle Ages, possibly. Most influential, maybe, from the ancient world. Copied over and over, like our French manuscript picture that I brought in. This tells you something about what's important to people in the Middle Ages, that they revered this book. They like logical arguments. They like exploring how God is working in the world, how it looks from his perspective and how it looks from our perspective. How they're not always the same. The perspectives are different. And congratulations, you have worked your way through Rome, and now we're kind of on the edge of the Middle Ages here. which sets us up for next year. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes. He did. He did. He died for, as far as we can tell, his only fault was trying to keep the people who were innocent in the Senate safe. It did not end well for him, but he has gone on to write that and be really influential to generations, and also turns up in that big poem, The Divine Comedy. So I'm going to shut this off.